welcome to my studio. And yes, this is the start of the Pretty Potions and Poisons Apothecary event. I like all things creepy, spooky, and sparkly, and I hope you do too. Sounds like a storm's brewing, a perfect atmosphere for our event. The event includes 3 tutorials, free images to download off my blog, and a giveaway. So let's get started. In this tutorial, we're going to cover how to assemble the boxes which make up the cabinet, and also I'm going to show you how I created all the things that are the decor around the cabinet. Now, all the supplies that I used, with the exception of just a few things which I'll note for you, came from Alpha Stamps. Normally in the tutorial I start out by giving you a detailed supply list and I show you all the products, but there are so many products involved in this entire series of tutorials that I've decided not to do that, and you can see all of that on my blog. And I also, as usual, will have a PDF file for you to download that has all of the information about the products and also has all the steps in the video tutorial. So let's get started. The first step is that we are going to assemble the boxes that make up the inside of the cabinet. And they are made out of these black paper mache boxes. We don't need the lids, just the inside of the boxes. And what you're going to do first is cut paper that you're going to use to line the inside of the boxes. And I use the All Hallows Eve line of paper, and I chose the green. Green appeals to me. And you're going to cut a piece for the inside of the box for each of these sides and these sides. So the inside back is 7 1/8 inch by 4 5/8 inches. You're going to cut 4 of those since we have 4 boxes to do. The short sides inside are going to be 2 7/8 inches by 4 5/8 inches, so you'll have to cut 8 of those. And then the long inside pieces are going to be 2 7/8 by 7 1/8, and of course you'll cut 8 of those as well. You'll want to go ahead and glue the paper inside your boxes, and you can see I've done that already on the other 3 boxes. And once you get that done, we're going to glue the boxes together. And I just used paper glue. I use the Tombow Multi. And you want to apply the glue liberally on the side. And I actually use my finger to kind of make sure I got it really good on the edges and the middle. I'll put a little bit more on there. And then you'll want to stick 2 of the boxes together, making sure everything really lines up straight. We don't want a wonky cabinet. And then you're going to use clamps to clamp this together. I use bag clips, and then I also have some small C-clamps that you can use to clip this together. Now, clamps work really good for clamping together the top, but it's really difficult to get this part on the bottom, you can see. So what I do is I get a lot of heavy objects and put them on each side and put pressure against the 2 boxes, as well as the clamps in the middle. And then you just need to let that sit for a while until it dries. You're going to do the same thing with the other 2 boxes, and then you're going to clamp all 4 boxes together, glue all the sides, and then put pressure on those. And you really want to make sure this is super square and that the fronts are together and that you don't have gapping in the back. Like I say, you want to put that pressure on it because this is the thing that supports your entire cabinet. So once you get this all together, then let it dry and we'll move on to the next step. So now your cabinet should be assembled, everything's glued together and dry. So we're going to work on covering the back sides and top. I'm going to flip this over, and the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to use 2 of the 12 by 12 sheets. I think I chose for this, I used the Sharp Dressed Man, and I like the striped side of that. And I think since one piece, you can do this a couple different ways. One piece will not fit on the entire back. So I thought it worked out best to just make the seam right in the middle, and then that way you could glue here and then wrap to the sides, and you would do the back and the sides at the same time. So let me do that. Find my glue. I'm just going to cover everything here. You could remove those stickers if you want to. Okay, and then we don't have to worry about the bottom because you're not going to ever see that. So I'm going to place one piece, make it flush with the bottom here, and use my little rag to wipe off any excess glue. Press it down. And then the other piece. Make sure that's flush together. Now I'm just going to kind of pre-bend it for the corners to make it easier. And then I'll flip it over. And put glue on this side. And then bend it over and press. Now you're going to do the same thing for the other side. Glue it and bend it around, and then you're going to go in and trim all this excess away. Okay, now you should have your sides and your back all covered and trimmed. And now we'll do the top. So I've got two pieces. I just kind of rough cut them, and I'm going to add the glue. And I'll do the same thing as I did in the back. Actually, I think this will work better this way. Straighter. Put the straight edge there. And miter this right here. They meet. Just press it. Make sure you got enough glue. Then I'll come back in and trim off all the excess. And you could try to measure it exactly, but to me it's just as easy just to put it on and trim it off. And then I come back in with black ink, stays on. You could use your the distress ink, whatever you've got laying around that's black or matches your paper, and just get those edges. Most of this front's going to get covered, so you're never going to see that. Just ink that up, and then you'll get all the white. Now the next step is we're going to dress up the inside here and cover all these edges. And we're going to do that with Dresden or German scrap. So you want to get a couple of pieces that will fit just the center here. If you have to piece this, you'll want to piece it underneath here. Now I'm going to show you a way to color this very easily. and make it a little bit more Halloween by darkening it. And the way I do this is I take StazOn. You need StazOn because it'll stick to the Dresden. And I just take this on a nonstick mat and put it down and grab this end and pull. And you'll get the ink just on the high points of the Dresden. And then you want to sit that aside and dry. And then do the same thing here. Just pull it through. And then set that aside to dry. And once it's dry, then you're just going to come in and glue that on the center and dress that up. While our boxes are drying, we'll work on the paper elements that decorate the cabinet, and that will include the frame, the owls, the dragon topper, and the sign. Now you can find those elements on my 2 collage sheets, and the thing we need to do is to make these items stiff enough that they will be supported on the cabinet, and also to add some decorative paper to the background so that if you see bits of the elements from the back of the cabinet, then they'll be coordinated with the paper in the back of the cabinet. So the first thing I did is I rough cut out the frames, the owls, the sign, and the dragon topper. And we're going to mount that on some very thin chipboard. You can see this is very flexible. If you don't have chipboard that's flexible like this, Alpha Stamps is selling this. You need like a 12 by 12, a couple pieces of that because of the size of the frame on the collage sheet. And if you have a Xyron machine, that works the best because it applies the glue evenly on the paper, and that'll work for the dragon topper and the owls and the sign of the Apothecary, but the frames will be too big, so you will have to glue those on. So here I have one of the owls, and I've run him through the Xyron machine, and I'm going to take him and put him on the chipboard. And you're going to need a sturdy pair of scissors because by the time you get the 3 layers, the owl, the chipboard, and the decorative paper, it's pretty thick. Now, of course, if you don't have a Xyron machine, you're just going to use glue and try to get glue over all of the image so that the ends adhere well and you don't have pieces of it coming up. Now I'm going to use more of the All Hallows Eve paper. You can use whatever you like, or you could even use cardstock, because this matches what I've used on the back of the cabinet, and you'll see that a little bit later. And I'm just going to apply that there, rough cut. So now I've got the owl on the front, the chipboard in the middle, and then I've got decorative paper on the back. And now I'm going to go out and cut him out. Now I've done all the rest of the pieces. I have the frame here, and the dragon, and one of the owls, and the sign. And one of the things that I do once I cut this out, just to make it look better, to cover up the white, because you always get that white edge when you cut things out, because the paper usually inside, unless it's cardstock, has got white inside it between the layers of ink. And also just to kind of frame the image better, I think you can see here, I'm going to show you the difference. You can see how the edges of this are darker, and I think it makes it look more dimensional and it frames it a little bit better. I go in with some Distress inks, and I use the Vintage Photo and the Black Soot, which I used for everything throughout all the tutorials. I edge all my images with ink of one kind or another, and these pretty much match go well with all the different labels and things that I'll be showing you. And I use foam sponges. These are the cut and dry sponges from Ranger, but you could use, if you wanted to, you could use makeup pads, anything like that. And I just come in, and on the owl here, I usually have one a little pad devoted to each color of my distress inks, and I just ink the edges. I ink here along the edge, and I also ink a little bit into the image. And I used black on the owls and on the dragon topper and on the frame here. And on the frame, when you have a straight edge, you can actually use your pad and come into the edge. So I did that, and then I also came back in with my sponge and just made sure everything was nice and dark. You saw no white. And then for the Apothecary label, I used the Vintage Photo. And you can see how much it changed, how much I darkened it from how it was originally on the collage sheet. And I think this makes it look a little bit more old and distressed, and really pops the center, because with the dark, with the outside being dark, then the front really the center of the image really comes out to you. So you'll want to do that for all your pieces, and once you have that done, we'll move on to the next step. Next, we're going to attach some Dresden to the frame pieces to give it more dimension and to dress it up a bit. And I've already done it to this piece, and I want to show you how to do this and get a nice mitered corner like you see here. So on this piece, I've already glued this down, except for at the very end. And you want them to overlap, and then come in. You've got a line here to work with on the frame, then come in with a small pair of scissors and trim right in the corner. And now pull the excess pieces away, and now you've got two nicely fitting pieces. Then come back in with your glue and add the glue to the ends, and then press those down. Now sometimes on the scrap you'll get little pieces of white, and you can just come in with a marker. I just use a Sharpie and just color that, and then you want to let that dry. Now that we have that done, we're going to go ahead and put our frame on the box. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to glue it right to the very outside edge, just barely overlapping the corners. So you might just want to play with it so you know what you're doing. And then of course you want to make sure that it's equal distance from the bottom. And then just use your paper glue. Actually, I'm going to put the glue on this rather than the paper. And just make sure it's spread well. And it's not going to completely meet in the middle. The problem when making the collage sheets is I couldn't make these any bigger because the collage sheets have to be 8.5 by 11. So this is as big as the frame could be and be printed. And then you're just going to put this in place, and you want to let this dry really well. And then we'll do the same thing to the other side. Make sure that that's the same. I can wipe off any extra. You're not going to see this because you're going to cover it with other things. Make sure that we look good. Get my towel. Just wipe off the extra. Okay. And now I'm going to put this aside and let this dry. And now I'm going to talk to you about the top of the Apothecary cabinet here. You can see where the dragon topper is and the lady skeleton, and then you've got the sign and the bat. So I want to talk to you about how I put that together and also talk about other options. Now in the sample, the way I put this together was I started with the dragon topper, and then I used chain, this rosary bead chain, which I like, is pretty, and it's already beaded, so that's nice. And I just punched holes in the top of the sign and in the bottom of the dragon and used jump rings to hang the sign. And then I took the bat and glued it underneath. But you could also flip that and simply glue the Apothecary sign to the top if you want to, rather than to the bottom. You could have the bat down here, or you could put the bat up here. You could also just take the sign and go at an angle. You don't have to put it in the middle. So however you want to do it will work. Another option to hanging it with chain, if you're not comfortable working with chain, is you could also use just some thin ribbon. So punch your holes and use ribbon to tie the sign to the dragons. Another thing that I did with the eyeballs here, to make them look more like eyeballs and look a little glassier, I used glossy accents and just applied glossy accents in a dome over the eyes and then let that dry, and then they'll look more curved and more like real eyes. You could also add some crystal eyes to the dragons right here at each point. A little red one or something would work nice. And then for the centerpiece here, this has got a nice little area that would work well to put whatever you want. And this is what I used. I used the skull and the setting for the skull. And to color it, give it that copper color, I use something called Gilder's paste, which comes in a little tin. It kind of pops open like shoe polish, and it kind of looks like shoe polish and feels like shoe polish. And the reason I like this product is when you're going to use it to rub on the surface of something and just accent the raised bits, this is nice because you can just use your finger. So you just get some on your finger and then go over the surface. And it's all it's going to do, because you're using your finger, you're just going to get those raised bits. And then I went over this as well, and I actually went over her face. I didn't care that, I wanted it all to look a little distressed, and I thought the copper color looks really good, looks Halloween color. And then you can just kind of, if you want to kind of get in there a little deeper, you can kind of dig in a little bit with your finger. And you let that dry, and to make it a little shinier, you buff it with a little cloth and it will bring out a little bit more of the shine. And then I glue this on here, and then glue this in the center of the dragons. Now for the bat, I did something similar, except I used the black Gilder's paste and went over the bat first with the black, then buffed that off, and then went over with the copper and buffed that off. Now if your Gilder's paste gets dry, and over time it might do that, you can just add a few drops of mineral spirits, only mineral spirits, no water or anything like that, and you can make it pasty again. Okay, next I want to talk about adding the feet. Now, the way I would do it if I were you is I would go ahead and make your decisions about the other pieces that you're going to glue on the front here, the dragon topper, the sign, the owls, or anything else that you want to do first before putting the feet on, because it's a lot easier with the cabinet flat. And also you don't want to put a whole lot of pressure on the feet. So I would do that first, but I'm just going to go ahead to show you how to do the feet and not worry about putting all that on. But like I say, I would just recommend that you do that first before adding the feet. And here's the feet that I use, and I like these because they're very sturdy, and they kind of have a little bit of a gothic feel to them. And so we're going to be gluing them on to the edges here. And I'm going to use the E6000 glue just because I want a really good bond between the feet and the cabinet. I'm going to wipe that off. Stuff is really stringy, but it glues really, really well. And I'm just going to apply the glue inside here and on the bottom, a little bit here, and then just put a little stringiness going on here, and then just put this in place. Press that down, and I'll let that dry. And press that in place. And while those are drying, I'm going to come in and add more of the Dresden that we used for around the frame. Come in and just glue that down. You might have to piece it. Just glue that down all the way across the front before you flip it over and glue the feet on the other side. Now I'm going to talk to you about what I did to decorate the owls for the side. You can see here that I'm using some feathers, I've got some cat eyes, a key down here with the word, or the tag from one of the collage sheets that says beware, the signs creepy and crawly. So why don't you come over here and we'll start with the owls. You can see here, we talked about earlier how they're backed and how I inked the edges. Now I use the same rosary chain to hang the signs. I use the rosary chain in the front, but in the back I just use regular chain. It's not as bulky, and there's no reason, this is a more expensive chain, so there's no reason to use it in the back where you can't really see it. And then I use cat eyes to for the eyes on the owl, and Alba Stamps is carrying a green one and a yellow one, so in a couple of sizes, so whichever one you want, the 5mm, the 7mm, the yellow or the green, either one will work. And then for the signs, if you're going to use these, I would suggest that you back them either with that lightweight chipboard or with cardstock, just to make them a little stiffer. And of course, you could just glue them on. You don't have to hang them with chain, or you could use ribbon to hang them if you wanted to. And then one of the coolest things that I like to do with owls, because I love owls, is I like to give them tufts above their eyes. And I use these feathers. I used black feathers, and I buy them in the craft store, and they come looking like this, and just cut them off. Now if you don't have black feathers but you have other color feathers, you can dye them black, and this is, you're going to see me do lots of dyeing with alcohol ink. So what I do is I have little lids that I use for each of my alcohol ink colors, and you don't have to worry about it evaporating, because you can always get it wet again by using blending solution. And I've already dyed a feather here, and it's being held by my extra hand, and I'll put a link on the website if you've never seen one of these or you'd like to have one of these. They're great for holding things, and I'll put a link to some sites that sell these. So I've got one that's already dried. So basically this is nice not only for painting but also to do dyeing of small things. And the thing about black is if you thin the black out, the alcohol ink out too much, you get purple. So if you really want black, then you need to use it full strength. Like I say, you don't have to worry about wasting it. The alcohol's going to dry out, but the blending solution will get it wet again, so you're not going to lose any ink. And I'll just give it to my hand here to hold while it dries. Whoops, flicking a little bit of it there. Then this one's already dry, and once it's dry, I'll just take a piece of paper and a toothbrush, which has escaped me, here it is, and brush your feather. And basically what you're going to do, this isn't quite dry, but if it were dry it would work a little bit better, but you're just going to brush the feathers out again and separate them. This is still a little wet. So once this gets really dry, you'll be able to brush this out and it'll look like this again. So, you know, if you got pink feathers or blue feathers, any color feather, you put black on it, you're going to end up with black. And then I glued, you'll want to snip off this long piece. I glued about 3 on each side. You can make him as bushy as you want him to be. And I just used a little bit of the Tombow Multi. I just put just a tiny bit and glue one feather, and then a tiny bit more, glue another feather, and so on until you get as many feathers on as you like. Then if you want to add the keys, those keys, they come in silver, And the way I got it to be the copper color was I again used the gilder's paste and my finger and just put a little bit of that on the key, and then hung the beware sign or the beware tag with a little jump ring, and then glue that in place. The next thing, before I actually attached it to the cabinet, I used double stick tape just to pop it up a little bit. I used actually 2 layers of this. If you use pop dots or whatever it is that you normally use to pop things up, I think it gives the owls on the case a little bit more, or the cabinet a little bit more dimension to pop them out a little bit. Next, I'm going to show you how to make Mr. Bones, who is sitting on top of the cabinet, out of paper clay. You have lots of options on how you can pose him. I have him just sitting up there on the top, but you could have him dangling down the side. You could have him, I originally had one of his legs sticking out of the hole here at the top. It's just really up to you. You could have him sitting in front of the cabinet, whatever strikes your fancy. So the 2 molds here are what you need for making Mr. Bones, and we are going to use paper clay. Now it takes, if you want to make the whole Mr. Bones, which of course you could just make part of him and just have his head and his torso sticking up there, but if you want to make the entire Mr. Bones, it's going to take a little bit more than 8 ounces of the paper clay. Now I'm going to be showing you other paper clay things when we get to the bottles and the books in the 2nd and 3rd tutorial. So if you're going to do all that stuff, you know, you might as well go ahead and buy the larger package, which I think is 12 ounces, instead of buying an 8-ounce pack, or 2 4-ounces, I think is what Alpha Stamps has. So you're going to pinch off plenty of clay and just kind of knead it in your hands into a ball. And then I'm going to do his head first. Just going to press that clay. Now, what I do, if I don't have enough, just pull it back out and add more to it. Because you want the clay to be really blended. You don't want any breaks or lines in the clay. And then press that back in. And now I've got plenty of clay. Now, I want you to watch what I do with my thumb. I kind of press it down and pull off the excess. And this makes sure that the clay is really pressed into the mold so you get a good impression, but it also gets rid of a lot of the excess. When this dries, you can sand off the excess, but it's a lot less work if you get as much as you can off of it while you're doing it. Okay? Then I'm going to show you, and I actually forgot a step there, I'm going to show you the chest. I have some powder here. It's a release powder, and Alpha Stamps carries this too, that makes it easier to get the mold out, or the clay out of the mold. You can still do it by poking something in there and kind of lifting it, but it'll make marks in the clay, and then you'll have to kind of smooth that out. So you just want to brush some of it in here. Don't need a lot. Got a little bit more than I actually need. This goes a long way, this little container of it. And I'm going to need a lot more clay. And when you're working with a big area like this, I'm just going to press, 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 press. It's kind of hard to get it all completely filled and leveled. And you do want to fill this, because I don't think I have enough, so I'm going to pull this back out. Put a little bit more in there. Because you want it thick enough to accommodate the wire that we're going to use to hold him together. Let me get some more clay. When you're storing your clay, you want to put it in a plastic Ziploc bag, And if you put a little bit of water in there with it, it will keep your clay from drying out. If you don't do that with an open package, I assure you it'll dry out very quickly. Even though the bag is supposed to be sealed, it will still dry out. So it's kind of like when you work with brown sugar. You got to put a little water in a Ziploc bag with the sugar, the package of the sugar, or it'll dry out. So this is a big thing. You can see it's really hard to get it flat. So if you've got a brayer, this is really helpful. Then you can come in with your brayer and just roll it on your clay, and it'll help you flatten things out in the mold. Once you do that, you can come back in with your finger and get rid of the excess. But remember, you can just sand this off when it dries. Another thing about paper clay is, of course, as it dries, the moisture comes out, so it shrinks. So your final version of this is going to be slightly smaller than what it is when it's wet. That looks pretty good. It's pretty well cleaned up. Then you're going to turn it over and get it to release. And I usually knock it with something, and hopefully this will pop out. Oh, he doesn't want to go. Oh, still got a little clay on the edge. Maybe that'll get him to come out. Here he goes. Okay, so there he is, and you can see, you can just brush the powder off. Powder's not going to hurt anything, even if it's stuck on there. We're going to paint all over that. Now you're going to do that for as many pieces as you want. And the next important thing is, while it's still wet, you're going to cut a bunch of pieces of wire, and this is the 20 gauge wire. It's pretty stiff. It's bendable, but yet it's sturdy. And we're going to use this to put the skeleton together. So you're going to want to insert this wire in every spot where a piece is going to connect to the next piece. So you're going to want to put a wire inside there, and you want to keep it in the center. So be careful when you're poking it in that you're not coming out the back or coming out the front. And I've done this already for the hands and the feet. Now, if you want him to sit on the top, you're going to have to bend the hips and get it to dry bent. So you want to just bend it up like this and prop it up against something so that it dries in this position. Now the torso is going to stick here, but there's no way that you can have the wire going in both the hips and spine and in the torso. So just stick a wire here. You're going to remove it later on, but just so that you reserve the hole. And you're going to have to do that in a few pieces because it's just not possible to have this all dry in whatever position you want. So you just need to stick wires in wherever you're going to need a hole so that as it dries, the hole remains. And you can just pull the wire out and we'll be able to pull that out and attach him like this. So you can see I have all my pieces molded and I have them connected with the wires, all except for the chest and the spine here, but I do have a wire in each one so that as it dries, it'll reserve the hole. And then I'll just pull one of those wires and then set it on top of the spine here. And after this sits here for a little while, it'll dry enough that you don't really need any support for it. Now, paper clay tends to like to twist and warp as it dries, so you really need to kind of control the drying. First of all, every so often you might want to just turn the whole thing over because it'll start drying on the top, but then you'll still be wet on the back. So I just keep turning it, and then if you can't watch it for a long period, you might want to just put, whoops, still got to fix that. You might just want to put like a magazine. Put another piece of paper towel on this, and then put a magazine, because the paper towel will pull some of the moisture out, just to keep it from bending and warping. It is going to take a couple of days to dry, especially with pieces as thick as the head and the ribs. And then once everything is dry, you'll see it get whiter and whiter. You can see that the hands here are much whiter because they're all completely dry. You'll just see it get whiter and whiter and whiter, and it might even look white on both sides, but you can tell it'll feel cold or it'll bend a little bit. You'll know that it's still wet in the middle. And you want it to dry completely before we go to the next step of painting the skeleton. Now once your skeleton is dry, you're going to need to paint it, and I painted it black. You can paint it either with black gesso, which is what I used, which is a primer for surfaces, or you could also use just black acrylic paint. And you can see I've got him all painted up. You can take him apart. We didn't glue the pieces together, so they should slide a little bit in and out, so if you need to get inside to glue them. And once that's all dry, then I came in with the Copper Gilders paste, and just like you saw me do on other pieces, I just come in and rub the Gilders paste on the bones. And the clay will be just a little bit bumpy looking, which will give you some texture and dimension. Also, when the clay is drying, when you have big pieces, sometimes you get little cracks and stuff, which depending on what you're doing, you might want to repair. But in the case of Mr. Bones here, I think it just adds to his general look. And I do the back too, even though it's flat, because that way if you see him from the back, you still see the same. He looks the same either way. And I'll do a little bit of the skull so you see that, because I think that looks really cool. And for the eyes, you know, I put some of the cat eyes in, the ones that I used for the owls. And you could do that, or you could put some of the eyeball beads in there. Would look good too. And I'm just getting all the high points on the skeleton. And when it's done, if you want it to look a little shinier, you can buff it. I didn't. I wanted it to look a little bit more matte, so I did not buff him when I was done. So you'll let it dry, do the whole skeleton, and then you have to decide how you want him posed. He's kind of big and ungainly, so I found in playing with him the best thing to do was to decide how you want him posed, and then glue the joints that you don't want to move. So I put him together, and I did all the bends ahead of time. Like, I knew that I wanted his arms crossed on the top of the Apothecary so that the crows could sit on his arms. And then I wanted to put other things on the Apothecary, so I didn't want his legs stretching all the way out. They took up too much room. So I actually bent him at the knees and at the feet, and then I glued his feet to the floor or the top of the Apothecary, and that way you don't need to put any glue at the joints here. And then I did glue the joint here and the joint here, and I actually put one of the candle bottles behind him to kind of support the weight of this. I would suggest, you know, pre-bend your arms and then attach them and then glue them. I would suggest just using the E6000 glue anywhere where you need to glue, you know, you want to put a little glue at the joints like the head here. Just, I mean, it kind of stands on its own here if you get enough wire in there, but maybe just for security, and if you want him turned a certain way, you might want to give it a dollop of glue so that he just stays in place wherever you want him. And yeah, and then his arms crossed over, and you'll have the ledge, you'll have the floor at the top, and then you'll have a little bit of a ledge there, and so then you can just prop the stuff up. Unless you want to do him some other way, you know, if you don't have the whole body, or you want to set him next to the Apothecary or something else, you know, you can decide what you want to do. So here, if you look back up at the Apothecary, you can see how I've got him turned. You see the cat eyes, and then you see his arms are kind of leaning on the front of the cabinet, and then he's got the two crows sitting on each of the arms. And then I have the sign Nevermore, which I'm going to have for you on the blog free to download if you want to use it. And then one of the crows is got a cage hanging from his beak with a crow in the cage. And that's a set of stickers that, dimensional stickers that come like 6 in a pack that Alpha Stamps is carrying. One of the things that I use to decorate the top of the cabinet are candles. And I'm going to show you a couple things with candles. I'm just going to use white candles. I think the technique I'm going to show you, I think, looks more spooky. You can use colored candles if you want to, but it's easier for me to use the white candles, and then you buy as cheap a candles as you can. The more they drip, the better they are. The first thing I'm going to show you is how to make a crooked candle. And I'm working over a nonstick craft sheet, high heat, so it can take the dripping of the wax. So you'll want to do the same thing. Unless you don't have one, then maybe use a tin foil or something so you won't set fire to everything. Now what I'm going to do is start to make this candle kind of a crooked, wonky candle. I'm going to start basically melting sections of the candle away. And you don't care that it gets black, because we're going to do something to it that you're not going to see any of that. And of course, the yuckier it looks, the better. And so you're just going to burn out, if you can see that, you're just going to burn out sections of the candle. Just don't get it so thin that the candle flops over. And you'll just keep doing that, just burning out sections, just carving out like a little groove in the candle. And if you've done a spot that you don't think is enough, then just go back in and get some more. And you'll just want to keep working on that. Hopefully you can see that there are big grooves cut out, and it'll make your candle look like it's wavy and crooked. So just keep working on it until you get enough away. Don't get rid of your wax droppings. Keep those, because you can take them, break them up, and put them in liquid in a bottle, and it looks like there's something creepy and goopy in your bottle. The next thing I'm going to show you is dripping the wax on a bottle. And these little candles are great. They fit in, most of the bottles that Alpha Stamps is carrying, they fit in the top. But they'll, like the vials here, the bigger ones will fit in here. And then you've also got the big one, the Victorian glass one jar, which can hold a big candle. But think about this, if you're going to put these on top of your cabinet, think about the sizes of the bottles and what would fit nicely on your cabinet. And I did bottles on both sides to kind of balance it, so think about that. So this little candle, I've already burned it some to get it down closer to the height that I want it. And then what I'm going to do is, instead of using this to drip, because it would take a long time for this to drip, I'm going to use another candle to drip wax on this one. Find a spot that doesn't have wax on it already so it can stand flat. And I'm just going to let this drip. And I'll light this too so it can drip on its own, but it's a pretty slow dripping candle. That's why you really want stuff that is cheap, so it drips fast. And it'll just start dripping down the candle. And I don't know if you can see on the bottle, I'll try to do it towards the front so you can see that better. I'm starting to get stuff build up on the bottle. Oops, put my candle out. Let me turn this for you so you can see it better. And you want to just keep dripping wax. Another thing you can do if the candle is very secure in the bottle is then you can just tilt the bottle and come down lower and drip more wax. So I like it where there's wax dripping from the candle and then also just a ton of wax on the bottle. So once you get this as waxy and gooby as you want it, then what we're going to do is use alcohol ink to paint the candle. If you use just a candle that's colored, then the color is pretty uniform throughout the candle. But if you use alcohol ink, you're going to get different high and low, light and dark points of color. Okay, now you'll probably want to get a lot more wax on this, but I'm going to move ahead just to show you the technique of painting it. And I have a little tub that I dedicate to my pesto colored ink, and I'm just going to set this in here to make it easier. The first thing I do is, I think it looks cool just to take the ink and just do a couple drips on the top. You can see that in the front. And let it just drip down because it's going to be more intense. And then I'll come in with a brush. This is a koi brush. It's a watercolor brush. And I have about 6 of these, and I use these specifically for alcohol inks. Once you use a brush for alcohol ink, then you have to leave it, you have to dedicate it to alcohol ink because it won't work well with other things after that. And so with having 6 brushes, it makes it easy. There's some colors that I work with a lot, and that way I can just kind of keep it dedicated to that color, and I don't have to change it a lot, clean it up to go to another color, particularly in a large project like this. So you just come in with your brush and just start painting your candle and all the drips. Get a little bit more ink down here. And don't worry about the ink drying if you use something like this, because you can just go back in with some blending solution and it'll come back to life, and you won't waste any of the ink. I don't know if you can see what I'm doing here, but I'm just coming in here and painting it. You can see some's light, some's dark. You get a lot of variation of color that you just wouldn't get if you just melted a regular colored candle. And a lot of colored candles are more white in the inside. You know, they're colored more on the outside. So then you end up with a lot of white drippings anyway. And you don't want to be perfect about it because it's supposed to look like it's spooky and something that would be in a witch's lair. So I would spend a little more time normally, but you can see already how it all looks different. You know, and it's okay if some of the green gets on the bottle. You know, it doesn't matter. This is one of these things that you don't have to be neat about. You can be messy. I like these brushes because you can do really fine painting with alcohol ink, which we will do in later tutorials. We're going to do a lot of stuff with alcohol ink. It's one of my favorite products. So yeah, you just keep going, keep painting. You know, I did one candle in the caramel color, which is kind of an orangey color. I did one with the red pepper, the orange. I did one, or the green, the pesto here. I did one with black. And then I left one white with just kind of the burn marks from dripping the candle. And you can see on the cabinet all the different colors and the different candles. And you might want to do some larger candles the same way to like sit around the Apothecary is just part of the of your design and your decor. Now I'm going to show you how I made this bubble bottle that sits on the top. I think this is a really cool shape. It looks really Apothecary to me. The first thing I did was apply stickers to the outside. And one of the things you want to do before you put anything on the outside of your bottles is make sure that it's clean. I just used some Windex to clean it up. And I used these stickers, these swirl designs. To me, they look kind of gothic. And they stick to these bottles really well. One of the tricks with a bottle that is curved is the stickers are meant to sit on something that is flat. So the way I do this, and hopefully you'll see what I'm doing here, is I place the center of the sticker on the bottle. And then if you were to try to press this all the way down, you would end up having it bunch up. So the trick to this is to come in with a small pair of scissors and just snip places on the sticker so that you can lay this flat. And you'll get a little overlap, but that's okay. So I'll stick the center down, and then now I can adjust this and the rest of it will lay down flat. So you kind of have to decide based on the sticker exactly where you need to cut it so that it will lay down on a curved surface. And you might have to snip it a couple of times depending on what you have. And there you go. I think I used the same sticker on the other side, and then I filled in with some of the other stickers in between. It might be a little hard to see with the liquid in here. And then I decided to make it look a little spookier by adding the cat eyes in the centers right here. Looks like it made sense for where the eyes would go. Now the cork, what I did with the cork is I first painted it with alcohol ink, and I did this with a lot of the corks. In this one I just used black alcohol ink, and if you want to you can just put a little on the bottom here and then just set the bottom down, and then come in and just paint the rest of it with the same brush I showed you earlier. And you'll just want to continue to paint this until it's covered, top, sides, all that. And I won't do that. I think you can figure out how to finish that. And then the next thing I did was I used some beading around the bottle, and this is the beading that I used, and I wanted it to be thicker, in other words more beads per inch. So I basically doubled it, and you can see here where I've folded this one end over and I've doubled it to make it thicker. This is just the leftover bead. When you buy it from Alpha Stamps you get a long string, and I've just used a bunch of it. So you just want to double your ribbon first, the beaded ribbon first, so that you got twice as many if you want it thicker, and glue that first and get that to dry, and then you'll glue this around the actually I think I glued it on the top of the cork here, like that. And then on top of that, because you will be able to see the glue is going to soak through the ribbon, there's not much you can do about that. But to dress it up even more and to cover that, I used another piece of the Dresden that I had colored with the StazOn ink, just like we did for the cabinet. And then I put that on top of the ribbon around the top of the cork. Now the contents of the bottle, again I used alcohol ink, and there's a couple ways you can go with this. Here I used the red pepper alcohol ink. You can dilute it with blending solution, which will make the color uniform all the way through the liquid, or you can do what I did for most of the bottles that I used alcohol ink, and you can just use regular old rubbing alcohol. One thing, it's cheaper, and the other thing is that it does not make the color uniform. It kind of breaks out the colors that are used to create the color of the ink. So in this case, I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but it kind of broke the colors into, there's some red, and then there's a little bit of a yellowy brown color. So it kind of looks yuckier if you use just rubbing alcohol than it would if you used the alcohol blending solution. And like I say, you know, if you're gonna be filling all these bottles with different liquids and stuff, it's a lot cheaper if you use just a bottle of alcohol ink. Then the next thing is I worked on doing my flying bats, and you can purchase these bats from Alpha Stamps. They come in a sheet, and what you're going to do is basically glue them to wire. I first colored them with just some just red acrylic paint works fine. And when you're working with a non-porous, well, this is a little porous, but your small surface like this, and you don't want to have brush strokes. It's really hard not to have brush strokes, no matter how many coats you put on. I like to use just kind of a stippling technique to paint it. I use one of these brushes that are for stencils, and I just stipple it on. Plus, I kind of wanted a little bit of the black to come through and not completely cover it with red. If you want it solid red, then you can just keep doing more coats of this. But I did this for both sides of the bats and let that dry. And then I cut 2 pieces of wire. This is a 20 gauge wire that you can buy at Alpha Stamps. And it's a little bit thin to hold the weight of these bats, so I took it and twisted it together first. And just get it to where it's twisted really well, like this one is. And you cut a little bit more than you need because you can trim off the ends. You don't want to end up too short. And I used the E6000 glue because these are going to be suspended on wire, so I want to make sure that they have a good bond with the wire. And if you flatten your wire down, just come in, put some glue on the wire and stick your bat on it. And you'll want to keep doing that with each bat. You want spacing in between them. And for this I did 2 wires of bats. You want to do like 4 or 5 per wire. I did 1 wire with 5 and 1 wire with 4. So just keep hitting the glue. And when you put your bats, your wired bats on your bottle, when you bend them to swirl them around, you'll bend them so that the bottom is facing down so you won't see where the glue, all the glue is. And you'll just let that dry. Then in order to be able to insert those in the top of the cork, you'll use something to poke a hole. And I kind of poked like one hole towards one side, you know, just kind of dig in there, and another hole on this side. And then you'll take your wire, and this thing, you need to trim the end here. I don't have a pair of scissors right now, but you need to trim off that little end. And then you're going to stick this in the hole. And after you, this is a little bit long, I used to use these. You want to put the hole down as far as you can in the cork. Then you're going to stick this in the hole and then put some glue in there. And I just used like a little glossy accent. And that'll hold it in place, let it dry. And once it's dry, then you can come along and bend your wire and swirl your bats however you want them to swirl, just like you see here. Now on top of the cork you see some sparkly stuff, and the way I did that was I used something called diamond dust. It's sparkly, and I actually dyed a little bit of this with the black alcohol ink. And one of the beautiful things about the alcohol ink is that it's transparent, so whatever you use it on, whatever the surface is underneath, that's going to stay the same. So if it sparkles, it's going to continue to sparkle even though you've covered it with the ink. So instead of white or clear sparkles, you get, you can see in here, you get black sparkles. And I just wanted to dress up the top, and I kind of thought of this as a kind of a gothic but pretty look. And so I just put some glue on the top, some glossy accents, and then sprinkled my dyed crystals on top. And then I actually used the same crystals for the inside of another bottle. And that is how I made the flying bat bubble bottle. You'll notice one of the things that I used to decorate the cabinet was this green material here, which is cheesecloth. And I'm going to show you how I dye that. You can find it in a grocery store. Comes in a package, it's very inexpensive. We'll also use some of this on the bottles in the second tutorial. And it just looks like this. It's white. And you can see that it's about this wide. And what I did is I basically figured out, draped it around and figured out how much I wanted, and then I cut it in half. To me, it was easier to work on it and dye it in 2 pieces as opposed to one huge long piece. So you can see here, I've already got a piece that's dyed. This stuff is kind of unwieldy. And it gets stiffer once you dye it. So you can see, and it's got kind of variations in the color. And we're going to use alcohol ink, of course, to dye this. And I have a cup here that I use for dyeing it. And you'll just want to take the amount that you're going to dye. Like I said, I did it in 2 pieces, so here's my second piece. I put it in the cup, stuff it down in there, then take some of the alcohol ink. I used Pesto because it blends really nicely with the papers that I chose from the Haunted Eve line, and I just squirt some green in there, and then a little bit of alcohol blending solution, because you want to kind of thin that out a little bit so you can coat all of the cheesecloth. And then you can see I'm kind of just stuffing it in there, moving it around, getting everything wet. And you don't want it to be all evenly dyed. You want darker and lighter sections, and you just want to suck up all of the ink on the bottom. If you don't have enough, you want it to be darker, then just add some more ink and then come in and add some more blending solution. The more blending solution you use, the lighter it's going to get, but you have to use some or it's not going to be, you're not going to get enough liquid to dye it. And then once you think you've got it the way you want, you can pull it out and kind of look at it. Then you want to dry it, and I use my little magic hands here to hold it in place over the cup because it's going to drip. And just let that dry. And once it's dry, it'll look like this. I want to show you the top of the cabinet, and I wanted to turn it around so it's a little easier for you to see. When you start thinking about what you're going to put on the top of your cabinet, and of course you can put decorated bottles, or you can do more of a little scene like I've done here. One of the things that makes it look neat is if you have things at different levels. And the front of the frame and the topper and all that kind of create a shelf or a kind of block the top. So in order for you to see some of the things, you kind of have to raise them up. And if you see here, this bubble bottle, I've got a lot of spider webs here, but you can see that it's sitting on top of something here. And then if you look over here, inside here, this little spray of sparkly stuff, it's sitting on something as well. So I want to show you what I did. Basically, I used whatever I had around the house. I have a lot of jeweler's tins, so I used jeweler's tins, and I also used these little storage containers. I covered them with paper and then used them to create a platform so that I could lift some of the items up so you could see them, and also create the different heights of the candles and the bottles and things. So you could use a box, you could use anything, just whatever you happen to have around the house that will fit on the shelf. Then the other thing is I like sparkly things, and so I thought the cabinet looked great with a touch of sparkle. If you go to Michael's this time of year, starting when they start putting their Halloween stuff out and then through Christmas, they sell a lot of these little sparkly sprays that work really nice to add like a little touch of sparkle at the top. This is actually the spray I used for the top, and I cut it off, so that this part would fit. And then little bits of this would also look cool in your bottles, either coming out of the top of the bottle or inside the bottle. I'm sure probably Joann's and other craft stores sell the same types of things, so you might want to be on the lookout for that, because that's another cute thing. The other thing that you probably noticed at the top here along the sides is the use of this spider web. And I also bought that at Michael's. You can probably find that as well at all kinds of craft stores or stores that are selling Halloween supplies. And it's really cool that you can really stretch it out and just drape it around, and it gives it a spooky look. Next, I want to show you how I made this little bouquet, eyeball bouquet is what I call it, with the eyeball beads. You can see I've got eyeball beads, and I've got a couple of different flowers, and I painted some of these flowers with alcohol inks. And I also want to show you how to wire the eyeballs so that you can put them in a bouquet. And then the whole thing is sticking inside of one of the bottles, which then I glued to the bottom or the base of the cabinet. So first let me talk about painting the flowers. I buy a lot of white flowers because with alcohol inks, you can make them any color you want them to be. And another thing you can do is just paint parts of the flower. So these are some lilies that I got at Alpha Stamps. They have a couple different kinds, both of these. And I just use the alcohol ink, a little bit of that on my brush. And when you're painting on something that's some kind of fabric or ceramic or something like that, the alcohol ink will sort of absorb and bleed into whatever you're doing. So if you're painting something like this and you only want the tips to be the color, then just start just at the very edge and work your way in, because it is going to bleed some and go in a little bit further. You can always add more, but you can't take it away. So you just go in and paint whatever you want. You can paint the whole thing if you wanted to. And then the same on the back if you want some of the back to be black, tipped in black. You can just come in, and this is just a really little brush, so it's nice to do a little detail like this. And just keep painting as much as you want. And then this is made out of, I think it's some kind of ceramic or porcelain or something. And did the same thing. You just come in here and just paint the areas. I left the yellow center, and I painted this all the way around it. And then also I painted the green stems, the paper. You just want to go ahead and keep painting that too. And then of course continue and paint the back. And of course you can add all the flowers or whatever crazy things you want to. And then for the beads, you're going to cut a piece of wire doubly long for what you need. You're going to stick it through the bead, come to the end here on the side with your two pieces of wire together, pinch it as tight as you can, and start to twist. You want to just hold that really tight and twist, 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 because you want that wire to stay on the side so that you actually see the eyeball. And then just twist all the way down the wire. And if it's not tight enough up here, just come back up and do some more tight twisting at the top. Oops, I'm going the wrong way, so I'm untwisting what I'm doing. That's another thing. Remember the direction that you're twisting. And just keep doing that all the way down, and then now you've got an eyeball on a wire. And then if like this, I probably need to double this wire, just like I did for the bubble bottle. But if it's not staying stiff enough, like this one's a little limp, then just double your wire before you do that, because these holes are pretty big. And then just wire as many eyeballs as you want, and then put together your bouquet with however many things you want, and then glue that inside of a bottle. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial and are ready to create your own spooky apothecary cabinet. The next tutorial will cover altering bottles and tins for your cabinet. Don't forget to check out my blog for free images, lots of eye candy during the entire event, and details on the giveaway. Wishing you a stormy night.